Hey, what's up, guys? This is Casino Crime here, and I am going to do another part of my series titled How to Play 25 PLO. We've covered a lot of good topics so far, and if you missed it, basically the premise of this short series is to talk about how to beat the micros and overall strategies to exploit the player types that you'll often see at these stakes. The last few videos have been on Bovada playing 10 cent, 25 cent, and that was due to a request that one of the members made. But I would certainly be open to doing a video on another site. Of course, being in the States, I can't play on stars, but what I think I'll do for the next video, or maybe two videos from now, is either review another video from a student, or what I'll do is play on a different site where we have a HUD. We can talk about like building dynamics with players and stuff like that. One disadvantage of being on Bovada is that it's very Bovada specific, right? All of these opponents are anonymous. So what we're talking about more here is just like overall theory, how to approach standard situations and develop reads against opponents that you don't have reads on, which is certainly relevant for players who are playing live, and don't have the luxury of having a HUD. But I know a lot of players here are certainly um, playing these levels, so it's good. Or playing with a HUD, I should say. So we limp behind with Ace, Deuce, 9, 5 double suited here on the top right table. Oh man, I wish we were playing high-low. Like, where's Chuck when you need him, right? This is like a great high-low hand. Realistically, though, it's a pretty good hand to limp behind with. There's a couple of things that we want to look at here. And we covered, in a previous video, we covered a lot of different tactics when facing limpers, right? But, let's talk about them again. Ideal hands for limping behind, right? Polarized hands, things that do one thing really well in terms of, suitedness, connectedness, or high card value. And here, this isn't the best hand to raise over limpers with. Now, a pretty good rule of thumb when you're thinking about what hands play best in which situations. Well, hands, as the SPR gets lower, and if you don't know what SPR is, it's stack to pot ratio. As the SPR gets lower, what you want is hands that flop equity more frequently and dominate your opponent's combo draws. Now, you might look at this hand and say, all right, well, this hand seems pretty, it seems like it has a pretty smooth, what's called equity distribution post flop. It flops a piece of equity, like a pair, or like a gutter, or like a flush draw, or some other various combo draw pretty often, right? But remember, it's dominating combo draw. And although we do have a nut flush draw, our other flush draws like pretty weak. When we flop a made hand, it's typically going to be pretty weak. And think about also the boards that we flop straight draws on, right? It's going to be the low boards, the boards that people don't play, the boards that don't connect well with the cards that people play, I should say. So if I was to squeeze here, I would prefer to have at least a king, queen, 10, 9 with a suit type hand, or like ace, king, jack, 4 with a nut suit type hand. If it was like ace, 9, 8, 7 double suited, I would raise it over the limpers. But given that it's in general, if for the high-low players, if it's a good high-low hand, it's a pretty good candidate to limp behind, honestly. And I can limp behind a lot weaker stuff than that, frankly. I like to limp behind a lot of pairs, like medium pairs, even like the 8-8 queen kings of the world. You can limp that behind, sure, why not? And especially against poor players, it's good to just see a lot of cheap flops in position. If you have any type of competency post flop, you could certainly play it pretty profitably, only because you're going to be able to get thin value when you have something marginal. You're going to exploit them with your bet sizing when you're bluffing, and you're just going to find a lot of good opportunities to make money. So I like to limp behind. I like to look for basically any reason to limp behind. In that situation, I literally would have limped behind anything playable, which is a strategy that's actually changed a lot for me as my game's developed and I've become better at playing post flop. We can see here on table 2 that I isolated ace queen 7-6 with a nut suit. I don't love it. I mean, again, this is something that I think that you can get away with maybe at these stakes. Frankly, like if you were playing, I don't know if you could really get away with this at like mid stakes or high stakes. It's just, one of the first strategies that people learned for Hold'em back in the day was like, oh my god, like isolate limpers and c-bet. Holy shit, we are printing money. But certainly competent players have adjusted to that, and it's pretty easy, once players see that you're kind of hammering limpers, to 3-bet you and abuse you for that. So, but at these levels, like people aren't really picking up on that. They're still kind of they're still on the level of trying to figure out like what their hand value even is, and they're gonna play pretty straightforward and just kind of let you like they're gonna play straightforward against your pre-flop aggression. So I don't mind it certainly as much at these levels. As played, like this guy's really short, and it's a board that should connect like with many different hands that are in his range pre-flop. So I kind of like delayed c-betting actually. I think that like on diamonds we can delayed c-bet. We get a free look at our gutter, and an ace. So I think it's actually a pretty good spot to delayed c-bet. If it was Jack 8-4 rainbow, I can get behind a bet, but Jack 8-4 two-tone when we only have like the 7 of diamonds blocker, I think that it's pretty good spot to actually just like check back. The turn's like an 8. Looks like I'm picking a bet here to like maybe get away with something. I could have even bet smaller, but he jams. And I think it's actually okay. I think I'm fine with how I played that one. Oh my god, would have rivered the 6. Give me my cards back. And I'm assuming we open this King 10 9-7 single suited again. Like I do believe, like I've mentioned that I played pretty aggressively in this session. I would love to actually see my pre-flop stats. But at the mid stakes, high stakes, I would be folding this. But I'm trying to play some hands and get in some spots. So let's play it. I certainly would, like, even at the mid and high stakes games, I would open that from the cutoff, but I guess I didn't open it. I'm kind of actually surprised I didn't open it. Maybe I was trying to play good, But I think that would be, not a great open at the mid and high stakes or with aggressive players behind you, certainly. We open the ace 10 8-3 with a nut suit. Nobody's really been playing back at me, so I think it's an okay open. I'm not thrilled about it, certainly. If we got squeezed here, like I would fold it. If the button had 3-bet me, I would fold it. And in general, these are the hands that play the worst in 3-bet pots at these stakes, in my opinion. If we're just talking about like hand versus range, or I should say, if we're just talking about in terms of hand versus range, but and that's just because like a lot of players have good ace high rundowns, a lot of aces, and stuff like that. So it's cool to just like open and fold. My objective here is just to like steal the cutoff and play it in position. We open on table 2 with the ace queen 9-8 with the queen eye suit. Again, like I think your default should be to fold this, certainly. There's not very many like these types of structured hands. Under the gun, I always want an ace high suit for the most part. If it was like ace king jack 10 with a queen high suit, of course, like I would open that. This is a little bit weaker. It doesn't help that we have 3 hearts in our hand. So I don't like my open at all, frankly. And you should be folding it. The tightest spots at the table are under the gun, or tightest spots where you should be playing are under the gun and from the small blind. In general, the only, I kind of have my default opening range from under the gun, and it's around 10%. I mentioned that in a previous video. But it can get as high as 15%, maybe even 20%, certainly like as we're like 4 or 5 handed, if the right players are in the blinds or I have like the right table dynamic, if there's a tight player in the button. In almost any game, though, I will say this is a poor open. But it's a good learning experience for us. Actually, we get a great flop for our hand, and we see bet and take it down. So nice. Um, Here's a cool question: would we ever check and try to check jam? Yeah, if we can. But I think that as a default, I try to just not get fancy when I'm out of position. If I like most of my slow plays are more likely to happen when I'm in position. I don't know. I would be more likely to actually slow play with a hand that was stronger. I mean, if I was gonna check here, I would prefer to certainly have like a set rather than like just top pair. So our hand is like kind of vulnerable, and although it's a good hand, it's not like mind-blowingly good. I mean, there's certainly a lot of runouts where our hand loses value. So it's better to just take it down, bet your hand for value. If he wants to jam, we're doing okay against a range typically on this board. So just bet and call. But if he was very aggressive, like some people, and I'm sure you guys have all played those types of players that just kind of can't wait to get it in when they have like 40 bigs and less, maybe even like 30 bigs and less. Happens a lot in live games too. Those kind of players you can check and like jam pretty reliably, and maybe even sometimes they'll fold. It looks like I called an open, or was it a limped pot here? I'm sorry. Here we go. Okay. Sorry about the delay here, fellows. And ladies. Can't forget the ladies. Jeez. Well, I just want to make sure I get this action right. Hey, and actually I noticed another spot. This double suited eights on the top left table here. I mean, really easy fold from under the gun, but hey, new players might see that and think it's actually a good hand. I would open it from the cutoff in pretty much any game. I might even open it from middle position if there were some very tight players behind me. It's a good hand to play in position though. Okay. All right. So it looks like a limped pot, and we check. Okay. Well, it ended up not even being a big hand. Somehow I confused the 10 cent 25 tables and the 25 cent 50 cent tables, so that's okay. It looks like I'm just ripping it in here with middle pair and a gutter, which I think all things considered is fine. And we lose. That's okay. Pretty normal spots here. Fast forwarding so we can, and like, I kind of said that I would limp behind almost anything. Like, I wouldn't have a huge problem limping this behind right here on the button. 10, 9, 8 deuce. Is it trash? Yeah, it's a pretty bad hand. But we're in position. 3 connected cards. If I had 10, or I'm sorry, deuce 4, 7, jack, I would fold. 10 and 8 deuce though, I don't know, 3 connected cards. It's not so bad. And you're getting such a good price on the limp. I mean, it's 4 to 1, 5 to 1 type odds. In live, a lot of times it's 7 to 1 to limp behind. I mean, any hand can make the nuts, right? So, as long as as a general rule of thumb, like as long as you're, limping behind and then not getting tied to big pots where, like you're gonna just have to play disciplined when you flop something marginal and not make big payoffs. Like if you're concerned about your ability to play post flop, then don't limp behind. If you're like just starting and you kind of think that you're not so sure about how to play it, then yeah, folding weak hands is fine. But if you're an experienced post flop player and you're willing to stab and give up on the right boards, then it's certainly fine to limp behind a very wide range. Here we open ace ace king 8 with a nut suit. Flop top set on ace 6-3 two-tone. C-bet and get called by the shorty. And in general, like, these are the types of boards where, I don't know, how you pick your flop sizing really depends on the stack size of the player. I chose a smaller size because I think I guess it wasn't too small, but, it's just kind of like I'm going to be c-betting this board a lot clearly. We want him to make a poor decision with, like, a bad, like, we want to induce from, like, some kind of straight draw or flush draw combination, so. And he's like, especially when players are shorter, like you can certainly choose smaller flop sizings to induce some stuff. But when people are deeper, if I'm going to bet, I usually would pick in the like 70% range on this texture. We're probably going to call him. He has ace 10, so we win. That's nice. And I believe I want to make sure I get the action right on this one on table 4. So we open aces, ace 3-5 with a nut suit from under the gun, get called from the cutoff, and the big blind calls us as well. And the flop comes king queen 9 with 2 diamonds. Yeah, it's a although we have a quote unquote overpair and a backdoor flush draw, it's just a board that's like too heavy in people's ranges. This is actually an interesting. This is going to open some good discussion for different board textures and how they play in different situations. All right, so whether I decide to c-bet these boards or not really depends on how tight or loose the preflop ranges are in my opponent. Now, when I'm playing like let's say that in multi-way pots, I'm certainly willing to give up on these boards a lot more, regardless of who the players are, right? Because, 10 Jack is one of the most highest or most frequently played combos of any player type, right? Like, people love Jack 10x combos. And so the, 7, 8, 9 boards, the King, Queen, 9 boards, I typically try to not put in too much money with bluffs there. But against looser preflop ranges, they're good boards to c-bet with your entire range, just because you're going to get a lot more folds. There's going to be more barreling opportunities. They're going to have a lot more kind of weaker, top pair with undercards type hands. So the looser the player is, the more that I attack these boards. And the tighter the ranges are, the more I give up. I mean, when you open pre and someone calls in the cutoff, of course, it varies player to player, but in general, those are usually, that's like a pretty strong hand typically, or like a Broadway type hand. And as you move up to mid and higher stakes, that's where you see a lot of players put their ace queen jack 5 double suited type hands, or ace queen jack 9, ace those types of hands. Ace king, I don't know, 7 8 single suited type hands, or just hands that are really strong, but that they think plays better as a call than it does a 3-bet, or hands that they don't want to 3-bet and have to fold to a 4-bet. It's kind of similar to the concept in No Limit, where if a tight player opens, people will just they don't want to 3-bet ace queen and then have to fold to a 4-bet, so they call with their broadways, or king jack and king queen type hands. So this would be a much different board if I had opened the button and the big blind called. I would probably c-bet, just because it's a heads up pot. The player's range is a lot wider. I'm not as concerned about running into 10 jack, and it's my hand isn't strong enough necessarily to check back and call 2 streets, so I'd rather just bet. And something else that's important is a lot of people just look at this board by itself, in a vacuum essentially, right? So think about the difference between players' ranges, whether they're weak or tight, tight or loose, but also think about ranges in 3-bet pots and single raise pots. Of course, this is a board and just king queen X boards in general, like king jack X, like jack 10X, like those types of boards, they connect a lot more with players' ranges in 3-bet pots than they do in single raised pots. So what I'm getting at is in single raised pots, I attack Broadway boards a lot more than I do in 3-bet pots. And then in 3-bet pots, I attack low boards a lot more than I do in single raised pots. So of course, like there's situations where both of those rules apply, but it's just important to like think about what your default lines are and how the frequencies in which you run into strong hands. In general, like I've said in other videos, the goal in poker or how to play profitable poker, your average player, your like new player thinks it's to like the best players are pulling off these high level bluffs all the time. Or they're getting away with a bunch of shit. But realistically, good players are just masters at picking good spots and getting players to fold their like medium strength hands and their air than they are like their big hands. In general, I pretty much never try to make someone fold a big hand. It's just like at these levels certainly, but even at like higher levels, people just they don't like folding. Nobody likes getting bluffed. And I think that certainly like for casual and recreational players, which a lot of these guys are, they don't want to get bluffed. So we just c-bet on table 2. Again, it's fine. Like I would prefer to just take the aggressive line. I don't really want to like check back and call one, nor do I really want to give like a gutter a free look at getting there. So I don't know. Our hand is vulnerable and it's good enough. It's good enough of the time to just bet for value and probably just give up if I got called once. And I would say, for people, like, it might sound like I have these default lines against all these different players, and it's true, I do. And I think that most players who play a lot probably should and do. This guy's aggressive, this guy's tight, this guy's pass. Like, you have all these different default lines against different player types. And that's what actually enables you to play a lot of tables at once. Is wasting less and less brain power on situations that you've come across before, and that just comes with playing. I actually just finished making another video for my site, and I was talking about how it's just like the best players have great better default lines than other players do, so it's important to work on those. Oh, and I was saying that if I had to pick, between your time between like studying and grinding, certainly pick grinding. You learn the most by grinding, and in general, we're trying to learn how to play poker anyway. We're not trying to necessarily just learn how to speak it. This open on table 3, it's pretty bad. I mean, my hand is trash. If I was going to start folding some hands on the button, this is where I would start. If it was rainbow, I would have folded probably. And maybe also if I wasn't making a video, I probably would have folded. But hey, it's good for educational value. And again, like I talked a little bit about boards that connect with people's ranges. I just felt like I have no blocker. Well, I have a 9 blocker, but it's pretty irrelevant on this board. It's a board that connects pretty well with people's ranges who call from the big. If he checks the river, though, I might stab. So it's okay. And then again, like Queen 10-10-8 rainbow, it's pretty junky. If the player on the button was at all reasonable, which doesn't seem like, I can't remember any specific reads, and it doesn't look like I took any notes on this player, like I would just fold. But I'm trying to get in some spots, so let's play. Actually felt decent for our hand, and again, like there's a big difference between this board in a 3-bet pot and this board in a single raised pot. I think that our odds of winning this hand are a lot better in a single raised pot than they are in a 3-bet pot. Um, so kind of interesting. He just donks. And we call, which I think is fine, of course. In position, there's no other real play. I would imagine we just call again, trying to hit. You know, some arguments could be made for semi-bluffing, but I think the only real mistake would be folding. And let's see if we try to bluff when he checks. I bet you we do. Yep. And looks like I pot it. I think I get called if I remember right. Nope, he snap folds. Well, then I think it's actually pretty. There's a couple of like pretty good things to note in that hand. One would be like his sizing. Okay, just kind of small. Like sizing is usually indicative of bet folding type hands at these levels. I have a rule that basically at the low levels when they pot it, they got it, and this guy's not potting it, so I think his range is a lot weaker typically. Especially on the turn, like, I don't know. I mean, you know, betting half pot on this kind of texture is usually pretty indicative of a weak hand. That's what makes me want to semi-bluff it, but our hand is almost like too, you know, it's pretty in between. Like, I'd rather, there's probably more value in just like calling and playing rivers and outplaying him like we did. So, good. If I open this ace jack 4-5 with a suit, it's not a good open. No, looks like I opened it anyway. That's okay. But it's good because we're coming across a lot of different spots. Oh yeah, I remember this hand on table 1. Let's talk about it. Okay, we just raised, like, this guy limps the button and we raise and he calls. And we c-bet, I believe. Which is pretty standard so far. You know, like, I'm looking, when I raise out of position or 3-bet out of position, like, I like to, well, in single raise pots, I like to c-bet a lot. In 3-bet pots, you can get away with more checking only because, like, the SPR is lower and you can have, like, a pretty good check jamming range and stuff like that. But, you know, like, out of position, it's just so much easier to play with the initiative. So that's kind of what I did here. You know, we bet the flop, get called. This guy seems like loose and kind of like a calling station. He's certainly not going to fold a flush to us. And I think that I wasn't going to try to make him fold like 2-pair. So I think I just checked the turn, like planning on giving up. And then we made a straight on the river. And, you know, like on this board, there's just a lot of different 2-pairs he can have. And he's never going to raise us with a flush. This guy's, like, again, like, because we just had a read that he was really passive and he's a call station, like, I don't want him to check behind 9-10, king queen, king jack type hands. Like, sometimes you will value on yourself, and I think that it's even, you'll value on yourself even more often, or I should say, like, you know, you'll value on yourself more because, like, we don't have a diamond, but then again, like, I bet small enough to where 2-pair or a worse straight is always calling us. So, like, I think it would be a poor play to pot it here without a specific read, but I do think that it's a good opportunity to value bet because of all of the, like, different, like, 2-pair and set combinations. Like, when the boards are heavier like this, there's fewer flushes typically. And when board, like, if it was like a 7-5-3 flush board, there'd be more flushes in his range typically. But there, you know. And too bad we can't see what he had. But we pot good aces. Something tells me our opponent calls. Yep. Flop overpair, a pair, and a gutty. Something tells me we c-bet. It would be an okay to check spot to check back too. Yeah, I think it's fine. I mean, it's nice being able to check back and get more information, and it does suck if we get check raised on this flop, certainly. So I think that checking back and like getting some more information and betting is fine. Betting is good as a default too against passive players. Like if it was against someone who, we were kind of unsure about, like I think checking back and calling the turn is a good play. Okay, and we're going to stop there for today. We covered a ton of really great spots, actually, I feel like, although it's a little bit of a shorter video. So, as always, I appreciate you guys checking out the content. I love talking about these spots and teaching you how to, crush the micros and the low stakes and move up. What I'm going to do now is, I think next week, finish off this video. We've got about 30 minutes of footage left, unless you guys have other suggestions and you'd like to tell me what you want to see. That's what I'll do. Hopefully you're getting a lot out of it. As always, leave your feedback and comments in the forum section here, and post some hands in the forum, and write me, man. I love hearing from you guys. It's cool. I've gotten a lot of direct messages from people saying they like the videos and, asking for coaching and stuff. So it's cool to, interact and listen to get what you guys want to learn about. So hit me up. Casino Crime, KASINOKRIME at PLOquickpro.com, or just direct message me here on the site. Thanks, guys. Take care and good luck.